Got it. Perfect. All right. Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I was telling Bianca before we started that it's so nice to be talking to humans again, and even if it is through a screen. So this is meant to be very interactive, and even though we are talking to each other through a screen, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat. I would love to answer some questions at the end or even throughout. If you've got them, make sure that you drop those in. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I know that some of you are maybe just joining me today because of the title of this session, You Are a Weirdo. And I'm hoping that you're coming with an open mind because I really love this topic. I love talking about weirdness and how important it is in our business. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. You maybe don't recognize these three guys, Joe, Nathan, and Brian, but you have definitely heard of them, even if you don't know them by name. About 10 or so years ago, these three guys were 20-something-year-old dudes living in a small apartment in San Francisco. And as always, their rent was really high, as it is in San Fran, and they were just barely scraping by. And they were all in the tech space. And one month, towards the end of the month, they realized that they were coming up short on rent. They just weren't going to make rent that month. And so they put their heads together and they did what any 20-something-year-old guys would do. They came up with kind of a crazy scheme. They said, what if we put some air mattresses on the floor of our apartment and we charged people $80 to spend the night in our place? This was a lot cheaper than hotels in the area. And so they tried it. They posted on the internet that they were going to be renting a bed in their space. And sure enough, 3 people took them up on it. They made $80 a pop and they made rent. So, this was kind of a crazy idea at the time. Nobody had really thought of doing this. Also, it was kind of like this idea of like inviting strangers into your house. How bizarre. But they thought they were onto something. And so they thought maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's a business idea here worth exploring. Over the next couple of months, they dropped $20,000 into this idea. They marketing and consulting and planning and websites, and they racked up 20 grand worth of debt. Well, their idea was kind of taking off and it was getting some interest, and some investors approached them and said, hey, we would love to maybe help you make this idea happen. However, you've got to clear your debt. We're not going to come on board if you're already carrying debt. So these three guys did what any 20-something-year-old dudes would do. They put their heads together and they thought, how can we make a quick buck to clear our debt? Well, what they ended up doing is they went to a printer, they printed a bunch of cereal boxes, and they went to Costco and they bought a bunch of cereal and they hot glued these boxes together, and they took advantage of something that was happening at the time, and they made these custom cereal boxes. There are some of these still floating out there today. They're quite collector's items. If you ever come up with one, please let me know. I would love to have one. So they ended up selling these cereal boxes for $40 a pop on the internet. They sold 1,000 of them in 24 hours. They cleared their debt. Their investors came on board and they became Airbnb. Airbnb actually became a company from a couple of guys who threw air mattresses on the floor of their apartment and served people cereal for breakfast. That's really where Airbnb came from. And it wasn't so bad of an investment, to be honest, because they've now topped $100 billion in market value. And as I said at the beginning, everyone has heard of them. So not a real bad idea, all things considered. So this is really where I want to start our story today, and that is here. Just because you have a crazy idea doesn't mean that you are crazy. A good measuring stick is whether or not your crazy ideas make money, or in this case, change the world. I think that we could all agree that Airbnb has actually changed the world as we know it. And so I kind of love this quote because so often in our businesses, or just literally in the world in general, we're told that's a crazy idea. It will never work. And we're taught to really kind of skew away from crazy ideas. But in this case, Their entire business came from a crazy idea. You've probably never heard of George Cayley. I know I never did. I didn't learn about George Cayley in school growing up. I learned about the Wright brothers. I was told that the Wright brothers were the founders of air travel. They invented flight, right? The founders of flight. But in fact, George Cayley was the one who invented flight. He invented the actual mechanism that allows airplanes to fly. And he was around in 1799, a whole 100 years before the Wright brothers. He invented this flying machine. But the reason why we never hear about George Cayley is because his own son had him committed to an insane asylum for daring to believe that he could fly. Now, let's talk a little bit about technology for a minute here. You remember these? I remember these. In the early 80s, this was cutting edge technology. It was amazing that we could go to a rental store and we could bring home a movie that previously we could only ever watch in a theater. And we could slide it into a big, bulky, expensive box that sat under our television, and we could watch a movie on demand. This was amazing technology in the early 80s. Now, when this first came out, when VHS tapes first came out, there were really only two kinds of videos that you could watch at home. There were blockbusters. There were movies that had been in theaters and then had come out on VHS tape. And then there were what I'll call adult films. Those are really the only two kinds of videos. And if you're watching this and you're laughing, you probably remember that curtained off space in the back of the blockbuster that you weren't allowed to go into. That's where they kept those VHS tapes. Now, this cutting edge technology really was amazing. It allowed us to sort of see the world differently and on demand. And that was not something that we previously had access to. Now, early in the 80s, there was also this woman. About the same time that VHS tapes came out, she was a 2 Tony Award nom. She had a 7-time Best Academy Award nominee. She had won 2 Oscars, and she was a primetime Emmy winner. She was at the top of her game. She'd really reached the pinnacle of her career, and everyone knew her name. Everyone knew who she was. But one day while she was on set, she was filming one of her most recent blockbusters, she fell and she broke her leg. And so she had to stop filming for a while, and she had to step back and take some physiotherapy and, sort of get her leg back working again. And while she was doing that, and she was doing the physical therapy, and her agent came to her and said, "I think you should make VHS tapes." And she said, "I'm not that kind of girl." But the reality is they said, no, not those kind of films. We want you to take the fact that everyone knows you, your fame, and we want to take this physical therapy that you're doing, and we want you to marry the two together and create a totally new genre of videotape. Well, they had a crazy idea, and she did it. Jane Fonda launched Jane Fonda's Workout. It became the highest selling VHS tape of all time. She ended up making 22 more workout videos. 17 million copies of that original VHS were sold at $60 a pop. And the personal fitness world was born simply because somebody had a crazy idea. One of my favorite quotes from Jane Fonda was this one: "If the career you have chosen has some unexpected inconvenience, console yourself by reflecting that no career is without them." Now, I don't know about you, but if I look back over the past 2 years, I have had plenty of unexpected inconveniences in my career. And I'm guessing that you probably have as well. And this idea of console yourself that no career is without them is really kind of reassuring. Everybody goes through some unexpected inconvenience. The key is to figure out what you're going to do with that inconvenience. Are you going to follow a crazy idea? Or are you going to sit down and dig in your heels? Since we're talking about technology in the early 80s, this was what a laptop looked like in the early 80s. It was huge, it was expensive, it was bulky, it was very heavy. There was virtually no battery life, and it didn't let you really do anything other than word processing. You weren't playing games on this, you weren't really sort of carrying it around with you. But it was the first portable computer. It was the first PC, and everyone was really excited about it. Well, almost everyone. There was a reason why the New York Times posted this. They were afraid of new technology. This actual quote appeared in the New York Times in December of 1985. On the whole, people don't want to lug a computer with them to the beach or on a train when they would rather spend time reading the paper. Somehow, the microcomputer industry has assumed that everyone would love to have a keyboard grafted on as an extension of their fingers. It is just not so. Now, I love to read this quote because I look down and I realize that we all have a keyboard grafted on as an extension of our fingers at every moment. And while some of us would love to say, we'd probably love to not have that now, we'd love the freedom back of the early 80s, it's just not the way it is. And so here we are looking at the norm saying that's a crazy idea. Nobody wants that. They would never want to do that. That's kind of insane. You've probably never heard of this app, Bourbon. I know I never downloaded it. Several years ago, there were a couple of guys that had this crazy idea to launch an app that allowed you to share pictures exclusively of your drinks. So bourbon and scotch and whiskey, and they thought everyone who were connoisseurs of those drinks would want to take photos of their glass of whiskey and upload it onto an app to share with others. Well, as you can imagine, it didn't really take off the way they thought. In fact, nobody had really ever heard of bourbon, and nobody really ever did hear of bourbon. However, they found that people were using their app to share photos of other things. And so they thought, well, why don't we pivot? They did. They relaunched the app as Instagram. 25,000 people signed up on day one. They soon had over 800 million monthly users, and they sold it to Facebook for a cool $1 billion. Again, another opportunity to take an idea that was a little bit crazy and turn it on its head. Finding out what people actually want can mean changing course. It can mean looking from the outside like you don't know what you're doing. But we forget that even the most successful companies were run by people just chasing the best ideas they could find, no matter what it looked like from the outside. We're getting at the point here. One of my favorite people who didn't care what it looked like from the outside was Steve Jobs. In fact, his entire business motto was stay hungry, stay foolish. Now, hungry we get, we understand the hustle in our business, but stay foolish seems like kind of a crazy idea. This idea that we're going to look a little bit silly, and boy, did he. Do you know that when we first launched Apple products, we were looking at these little tiny music playing devices. We were looking at the iPod. And it was the first opportunity for us to actually carry music around in our pocket. We didn't have to have these giant Discmen where we're putting in tapes or CDs and, having these big bulky things that we couldn't really run or exercise with. Now we have these little tiny devices that had 1,000 songs in our pocket. It was revolutionary, really changed the music industry. It changed the sharing economy. And it was a little bit silly because his next iteration was, he said, what if we were to take cell phones and iPods and marry the two together? What if we were to put music on our phones? Well, this seemed like a silly idea at the time. We had these ridiculous flip phones. You could barely text on them. Why would we want to put our music all on one device? And in fact, it seemed so silly that there was an article posted on an online news platform that is still live on the internet today. This article still lives on the internet, and it's called Why the Apple Phone Will Fail and Fail Badly. December of 2006, lovely Bill Ray here launched this entire big blog post about how the Apple phone is going to crash and burn. Nobody wants to put their phone and their music together. It's ridiculous. Nobody's going to want to do that. And boy, was Bill wrong. 13 years later, 23 iPhone versions later, over 3 billion iPhones sold worldwide. And we're still seeing Apple follow that mantra of stay hungry, stay foolish. Now they're removing things like earphone jacks and chargers. And now you charge it on a flat surface instead of plugging it in. And every time something new launches, we think that's crazy. People will never want that. And it's only crazy until it becomes normal. A few years ago, I heard this quote, speaker standing on stage, and he said to us, a room full of real estate professionals, he said, disruptors solve the problem the establishment can't or won't. Guess what? You are the establishment. You know, when he said that, kind of a hush fell over the crowd. We were in this room full of disruptors and innovators. We were in a room full of the most innovative real estate professionals in the world. We had come together for a tech conference, and we were talking about how to basically turn real estate upside down and backwards, how to change the things that we didn't like, and how to basically disrupt patterns. And Ron stood on stage that day and he said, disruptors solve the problem the establishment can't or won't. And then he looked at all of us, these innovators, these disruptors, and he said, you are the establishment. It was a light bulb moment for me because I realized he's right. There are so many of us that say we're disruptors and we're innovators, but we are the establishment. There are so many things that we're not changing and we're not doing because we don't want to look silly or crazy or weird. We don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing. I started really digging into the word disruptor after that session. I looked up the definition of disruptor, and it is a company or a person or an organization that changes the way, the traditional way an industry operates in a new or more effective way. Someone who changes the traditional way the industry operates in a new or more effective way. I kind of loved that. And I really started thinking about how we've used the word disruptor. I started looking up when disruptor really became a thing. And as you see this graph along the bottom of your screen, disruptor has always been around. Disruption as an idea and the word disruptor has always been around. But not until the early 80s did we really see this hockey stick. And what happened in the early 80s? Well, we had VHS tapes and the iPod, and we had cell phones and the internet, and we had personal computers. All of these things completely and totally started disrupting the way that we had always operated in a new or more effective way. I started really thinking about this idea, and I started thinking, most importantly, about the biggest lie I have ever been taught in real estate. Now, I've been in the industry 25 years this year. I started out answering phones at a front desk. I've worked almost every single role in real estate that you can imagine. And from the very beginning, I have had mentors and brokers and amazing people in this business teach me so many things. But the number one lie that I have been taught in real estate from day one is that if you want to beat your competition, you have to be better than them. And when I started digging into disruption and weirdness and the establishment, I realized that it's not true. If you want to beat your competition, you don't have to be better than them. If you want to beat your competition, you have to be different from them. Really important distinction. Different is better than better. And yet so many of us go around in this business just trying to do what everyone else is doing because we don't want to look weird or crazy. And we just try and do it better. That is not how we beat our competition. That is not how we disrupt. That is not how we create a new or more efficient way. We have to be different. And so what I want to talk to you about really for the next little bit here is how to stop being the establishment. I want you to be a weirdo. I really hope that when you leave this session today, as you go out and start your day this morning, that you are inspired to say, I am a weirdo, and be really excited about it, to look at ways to be weird in your business. Because I don't want any of us to be the establishment, to be the people who can't or won't solve problems. I want us to think, how can we be different instead of just better? The question I want to ask you today is, what makes you weird? Now, this seems like a really funny question, and typically people come to this session with either two opinions. First of all, I'm not weird. I hate that word. I'm never going to be weird. It's so offensive. Or I'm totally weird. I'm leaning into weird. I love weird. Either way, I'm hoping that as you leave today, you ask yourself, look deep into your business and think, what makes you weird? Now, I could easily just leave it here and say, go be weird. Woohoo! But I'm not going to do that. I want to give you 7 ways you should be weird in your business today. So if you're taking notes, now's the time to pull out a pen, start writing these down. But as we said, we are also recording this, so you will also have the ability to go back and take a look at it. But I want to give you 7 specific ways that you should be weird in your business. Now, the first one is really critical. It's one that has absolutely changed the way that I look at everything I do in my business. Several years ago, there was a company that started publishing a report every year. It's called the ENSO report, E-N-S-O. The ENSO report comes out annually, and what it does is it ranks companies in the United States, companies, organizations, affiliations. It ranks them according to one criteria. Not how much we love their logo, not their personal branding, not how much money they make, not their popularity, how much they sell. It's not based on any of those normal rankings. The ENSO report ranks companies and organizations in the United States solely on how much good they do for the world. From our viewpoint, the consumers. It's a fascinating report. When it first came out, I was totally sucked in, because one of the things that they did was they broke the report down by demographics. You could see boomers versus Gen Z versus millennials versus Gen X, and you could start to see how we were viewing the world by different demographics. They also broke it down by gender and geographic location. It was really quite fascinating. One thing really stood out. Every year, the ENSO report came out, and the top 10 were always not-for-profits. They were always charitable organizations. They were Big Brothers Big Sisters, or the World Wildlife Foundation, or Habitat for Humanity, and that made sense. But 2 years ago, the ENSO report came out, and for the first time, there was a company in the top 10 that was very much not a not-for-profit. And it was kind of shocking when it came out. People thought, how could people think that they do good for the world? If we were in person right now, I would ask you to guess what company that is. If you are quick and you want to jump in chat, I would love to hear your guess. What company do you think it is that hit the top 10 of the ENSO report and isn't a not-for-profit? It was really surprising. In fact, a lot of people thought, this is kind of insane. I cannot believe that this is happening. Oh, we've got somebody guessing Apple. Close. Amazon. Good guess. You are right. If you said Amazon, you're right, Joanne and Mary. Good job. All right. So this report came out, and there was Amazon at number 7. With the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and Habitat for Humanity and Doctors Without Borders. And this was surprising, because we thought, how could people think that Amazon does good for the world? Well, I started digging into this idea. This really fascinated me. I'm kind of a researcher at heart. And so I started digging into why people think companies do good for the world or do good for them. And I came across, here's the entire report, by the way. If you ever want to look at it, you can pull up the ENSO report. It's called the World Value Index. It's fascinating. You can take a look at all the way, the whole gamut. I started digging into this idea, and I came up with this research report that Harvard Business Review did almost a decade, well, more than a decade ago now. And they dug into the idea of what creates loyal customers. How do you get customers to come back? How do you get people to be loyal to your business? This is something that we have talked about for decades in this industry. How do we get more repeat and referral business, right? How do we get more of our clients to refer to us, come back to us? And this is the loyalty gap that we've always had in this industry. NAR tells us every year that 82% of people say, I would totally use my agent again or refer them, but only 7% do. What is happening there? Well, Harvard Business Review found out that most companies say that delighting their customers is what builds loyalty. Amazing customer service, over the top experiences. But Harvard Business Review found in this massive study that that's not what builds loyalty. Reducing their effort, the work they must do to get their problem solved, is actually what creates customer loyalty. And so I started looking back at Amazon and realized Amazon patented the one-click order button. You can buy now with one click. It doesn't get much easier than that. And so it makes sense that if we think, well, if I can do that easily and it's simple and I don't have to put any effort in, then obviously that's good for me. And if it's good for me, it must be good for the world. It's a really interesting way to look at the way people think. And so I want to give you number one way to be weird in your business. So if you're taking notes, number one way to be weird in your business is make it easier for your customers. Get rid of the roadblocks. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, Val, how do I make it easier? I know that my customers, already have to go through regulatory issues and COVID issues and, appraisal issues and lender issues. And I don't know really how to make any of that easier for them. But we can make it less complicated, right? How do we make it simpler for our customers? An easy way is make it easier for them to reach you. Most of us, we're hiding behind these crazy screens where I have to do 6 or 7 clicks to find you on a website. And once I get there, I can't actually reach you. I don't have a direct email or a phone number. I then have to, click a box that says contact agent. And then I have to, go through a CAPTCHA where I have to see, which screen has a fire hydrant in it. And then I can leave you a message, but I don't know if it actually reached you. We make it so hard for people to contact us. I kind of applied this directly to my own business a few years ago. Right at the very top of my website was a button that said, call me. If you click that, it automatically dialed my number. People said to me, Val, that's crazy. You're going to get all kinds of weirdos that call you. And I thought, well, whatever. I never got a single weirdo. You know what I got? A lot of people that called me and said, oh my God, I can't believe you answered the phone. I want to hire you. So how can we look at what we do every single day and find simpler, smaller ways to make it easier for our customers? That's the challenge I give you today. Number one way to be weird, make it easier for them. All right. You've probably heard of Zappos if you have ordered anything online, even remotely shoe related in the last several years. You have definitely heard of Zappos. Zappos was created to be a shoe company that sold shoes online. Now, that in itself was a crazy idea because you can't try them on. Like, how does that work? But Zappos has amazing customer service. You order from them, they ship you the shoes, you get to try them on. If they don't fit, there's a prepaid sticker in the box. You literally just put it back in the box, put the sticker on it and drop it in the mail. It costs you nothing. Zappos even now has this buy two and only keep the one that fits you and send the other one back for free. And you don't even pay for it until you decide which one you're going to keep. So you can, if you're between two sizes. So they really revolutionized the idea of customer service with online shoe wear. Zappos started as a really small company in the Bay Area, and it was very expensive to live there, as always. And they were trying to hire as they were growing, and they were finding that it was really difficult for them to find people that could work with them because it was super expensive to move people into the area. And so a couple of years into their inception, they had 90 employees at the time. They pulled everyone into a room and they said, we are making a really difficult corporate decision. We have decided to move the entire company out of the Bay Area and to Las Vegas. And we'd like you all to come. Like 70 of their 90 employees packed up their families and moved to Las Vegas with them. It's considered one of the best places in the world to work. It is the most amazing experience if you ever have visited a Zappos. they have a very unique hiring process. So when you go to interview at Zappos, you park offsite and you have to get on a shuttle bus to their location. And no matter how well the interview goes, if you don't interact with the shuttle bus driver, they don't hire you. And once you've been working at Zappos for a couple of months, they come to you and they say, we'll give you $3,000 to quit right now. Because they figure if you are going to take that, they would rather you leave up front than to continue to invest in you. It's a really customer service focused business. So much so that there's this urban legend, which is actually a true story about Zappos, is that once the CEO was out partying with a bunch of friends, and it was about 2 a.m, and they wanted to get some pizza and it was late. And one of his buddies said to the CEO, like, where can we find pizza this time of night that delivers? And the CEO said, I don't know, call my help desk, call my call center. They'll look it up for you. And the guy was like, whatever, you sell shoes. And he's like, no, do it. Called the call center, person answered, hi, this is Zappos, how can I help you? Hey, I'm out with your CEO and we're looking for pizza in the Seattle area. Where can we get pizza this time of night? Call center person said, well, here you go. Here's the number for 2 pizza places that deliver that are near you. The reality is that Zappos is absolutely known for amazing customer service, so much so that they say, we are a customer service company that just happens to sell shoes. Now imagine if we took that mantra on and we said, we are a customer service company that just happens to facilitate the buying and selling of real estate. What a different mindset on the way that we operate, to be able to say that that's the first and foremost thing. I used to, years ago, answer phones for an IBM help desk. I always recommend everybody do this at least once. Everybody at least once should work in a restaurant and work in a call center. And for a short time, one summer, I worked for IBM. And this quote perfectly sums up my experience there. One time I was on the phone with a customer and I said, can you tell me about the problem you're having? To which the customer responded, let's get this straight. This is a problem you're having. I love this quote. It actually hangs above my computer here in my office. I look at it every day. Let's get this straight. This is a problem you're having. This was one of the fundamental mind shifts that changed the way that I do business. Instead of me saying, what is your problem? I take on that problem and I own it. This is one of my favorite exercises to do with clients. I give them a big blank wall and a whole bunch of sticky notes, a ton of sticky notes. And I say to them, we are going to fill this wall, and every single one of these sticky notes is going to note a pain point that our customers experience. Either our buyers, our sellers, our renters, our investors, every one of them experiences pain during the process of buying or selling a home. What are those pain points? And we sit down and we get really serious about pointing out what those pain points are. And when we're done, we have an entire wall full of pain points that our customers experience. I highly recommend that you do this exercise, either by yourself or with your team. It is extremely eye-opening to look at the process of buying or selling from the perspective of your clients. Once we do this, we look at this entire wall full of sticky notes and we start divvying them up. These are going to make great blog posts. These are going to make great marketing material. These are going to make great videos. These are going to make really good articles for our newsletter. These are going to make great social posts. And now we've got an entire year's full of content that we have identified that are pain points that we can own. Number 2 way to be weird in your business, own the problem. Don't just say, tell me about the problem you're having. Tell me about the pain you're experiencing in buying or selling a home. How can I help you? Say, no, I'm going to own the problems that you have, and I'm going to take it on myself to find ways to fix them, or at least to educate you on how we can make it better. This is a huge mind shift that happened for me. Instead of thinking, oh, my clients experience pain and I'm there to help them, feel better. My clients are experiencing pain. Those are my problems to own in the transaction. So second way I want you to be weird, own the problem. I want to talk to you about these 2 dudes for just a second. The one on the left, ironically, walked around this video topless most of the time, which I never noticed while I was an adult. always thought he had a shirt on under that coat. Anyway, he's not the important one in the story. I want to talk to you about the dude on the right, the real hero of this story. You all know the song. If we were in person, I would make you sing it. I will not sing it for you today, but Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose. And if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They wouldn't even let poor Rudolph join in on the reindeer games, blah, blah, blah. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? That is the most important part of the story, according to me in this part today. You know, he was weird. Rudolph was weird. He was born weird. Everybody else had a black nose. He had a red shiny nose. It lit up. It was strange. It was bizarre. Everybody thought he was just weird until it got foggy. And then Santa was like, hey, headlights, we need you. And all of a sudden he was the hero, right? Reindeer Hall of Fame, went down in history, blah, blah, blah. But this is the part of the story that I want you to think about today, because this is not how I want you to react in your business. See, the thing is that in the movie, the awesomeness of the shiny nose went up. It increased in value when the fogginess of Christmas Eve increased. Nobody thought he was cool. They all thought he was weird, and they wouldn't play with him, and they wouldn't, they didn't like him until he was useful. And this is not the goal in our business. And it took me a lot of years in real estate to believe this and to actually implement this into my business. I always thought, like, the awesomeness of me is only really apparent when other people realize it and when other people acknowledge it. But that's not the goal. One of my favorite writers said this: if you are waiting for a magical moment where your value is apparent to everyone, you are missing out on being magical right now. The future belongs to the weirdos and the misfits. If you're waiting for a moment where your value is apparent to everyone, you are missing out on being magical right now. If you are waiting for that foggy Christmas Eve to turn on those headlights, you are missing out on being magical right now. One of my friends always says, imagine being the very last hotel to offer free Wi-Fi. At that point, it's not magical anymore. But imagine being the first hotel to offer free Wi-Fi. People thought you were crazy, but it was magical. Right? The future belongs to the weirdos and the misfits. So the third way that I want you to be weird in your business is be willing to be unpopular. Be willing to do the thing that is weird, because that is where the magic is in your business. Don't be the last hotel to offer free Wi-Fi. I would encourage you to look at the way that you've strategized around your business this year, the things that you've put in your business plan, and think, what is it that no one else is doing? That is your opportunity to be different, to be weird. So often we look at our opportunities based on what the opportunities everyone else is acknowledging. But what about those opportunities no one else is doing, right? We are not the establishment. We are the weirdos. We are the innovators, the disruptors, changing the status quo. Be willing to be unpopular. Speaking of unpopular, Adia and Alon, they moved to the US a few years ago, maybe about a decade now. They immigrated here, and they created something that was completely unusual at the time. They were renovating their house, and they said, what if there was a site that we could go to, that we could look at all the things that would go in our house, and then we could click on those things and it would tell us where to get them, but also who could install them for us. Well, that thing didn't exist. It just didn't. And so, like everyone doing a renovation, they were going around and they were going to a bunch of stores and they were getting quotes and they were, trying to put them all together. And then they were asking people, who do you know that could install this? And they thought, there has got to be a better way. We need a better way. And so what they did is they created it. They created a site where you can look at pictures of houses and you can see the things that are in the pictures. You can see the pull-out dishwasher drawer, and you can see the stovetop and the fridge and the microwave and the coffee maker and the hood. And you can click on those and you can see how much they are. And then you can find a local contractor that can install them for you. They created this. And it wasn't so bad of an idea, because Houzz, as we know it today, now has 40 million users, 1.5 million local professionals partner with them. They have 9 million products featured on their site. They employ 1,500 people, and they're valued at over $4 billion. Now, the reason why I bring this story up is because the fourth way I want you to be weird is I want you to create something you would use. I have been in real estate marketing for years, and I am this person that literally goes straight from my mailbox to the recycle bin. All of those flyers and postcards and things that people send me go straight into the recycling every week, because almost none of it is something that I would use. And so I challenge you guys, as you are looking at your marketing for this year, as you are going, as you are in the midst of one of the hottest markets I have ever seen in my career, I would challenge you to not spend your time on stuff that you yourself wouldn't use. Ask yourself, if I got this in the mail or in my inbox, would I use it? And then adjust, right? There's no shame in saying, hey, this is something that I could scrap or adjust or update. So the fourth way I want you to be weird is create something that you would use. Let's talk about these guys for a second. Adam and Miguel. You probably have heard of them now. Huge documentary that just came out. Fascinating story. Adam and Miguel were a couple of guys living in New York City. Adam had gone to design school. It was his dream to design. Instead, he found himself designing kids' clothes for Instagram influencers. That's a thing, by the way. And I feel terrible that I missed out on that opportunity as a young one, because I feel like I could have really rocked that. Anyway, he was designing clothes for child influencers. He wasn't really kind of following his passions, but he went to his friend Miguel and he said, hey, we need more space. Our warehouse here in New York is too small, but we don't want to spend a lot of money. Can you find us something cheap and bigger? And his friend laughed and said, of course, that doesn't exist in New York. And they said, well, what if, we had a space that we could share? Like, what if, we had a space and somebody else used that space and we just kind of shared it and shared the cost? Well, an idea was born. And they created spaces that you could work and have clients, and you could have a desk, and you didn't have to pay for this huge, expensive space, but you could still meet your clients and have meetings. Well, as you know, the idea took off. It became WeWork. We've all heard of this now. They grew really quickly. 500 locations, 5,000 employees, a $45 billion valuation, the second most valuable startup ever behind Uber. I mean, they were rocking it. Everybody thought this was genius. Everybody thought this is amazing. So cool how quickly and amazingly this grew, until it crashed just as quickly. You've seen the headlines, it was a major disaster. SoftBank had to step in and basically take them over. It was nuts. The whole documentary, you should watch it. It's nuts. But the lesson that we can learn from this, immense growth and then huge crashing failure, is this. Maybe my favorite quote of all time: learning and innovation go hand in hand. The arrogance of success is to think that what you did yesterday will be sufficient for tomorrow. The arrogance of success is to think that what we did yesterday will be sufficient for tomorrow. This has been a huge deal for me in the last 2 years, to realize that, we came into this pandemic with this idea of, I've been through a downturn. I've been through a recession. I know what to do. I'm just going to do what I did last time, or I'm just going to keep doing what I've always done. Or worse yet, all the gurus and the coaches that kept telling us, just go back to basics. We can never go back. This isn't the same situation we were in before. The arrogance of success is to think that what we did yesterday is enough for what tomorrow is going to bring to us. And that is the whole reason why WeWork crashed, is they thought, this is what we've always done. We're just going to do more of it. We're just going to do faster. We're just going to do it bigger. The fifth way that I want you to be weird in your business is don't be afraid to pivot. Now, I know. Some of you are saying, Val, I am so sick of the word pivot. And I get you. I am too. But the reality is that this is the most critical element in our business, is the ability to adjust. the ability to move out of a space that we need to move out of, maybe before everybody else is moving out of it. The people that succeeded the most in the last 2 years were the people that got moving the quickest, not the people who stayed in one place. This is basically a map of the last 2 years, but this is a map of a cycle we go through over and over and over again in our business. Things are normal, things are chugging along, and then something happens. Crisis, change, right? A pandemic, a natural disaster, a bad market, whatever. Something happens. And what follows that crisis is chaos. And while chaos isn't comfortable, it is the most opportunistic time in our business. We have opportunity to do anything. When we first went into this pandemic 2 years ago, the people that immediately started doing video and immediately started jumping on Zoom are the ones that got to adapt faster, because they saw that in chaos is opportunity. In chaos is no more, this is how we've always done it. Is no more, well, these are the rules. This is how we do it. This is how it has to be. It's opportunity to do it anyway, because nobody's done this before. If there's one screen grab I want you to take out of this session today, it's this. The person who gets through this process the fastest wins. The way to be different in your business is embrace this and get to adapt faster. And speaking of getting to adapt faster, I want to talk to you about human behavior for just a minute. Simon Sinek says there's only 2 ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. There's only 2 ways to get people to do something. We can manipulate them. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a 2-for-1 coupon. Sometimes it's a bit of peer pressure. Sometimes it's a sale. Or you can inspire it. Inspiring is the harder bit, though. It's tricky in our business. How do we inspire people? How do we get them to change their behavior? Or how do we get them to trust us? It's a really big question in our business. How do we inspire that trust? Other than making things simpler, how do we get people to trust us and use us? I work with brand new baby agents a lot. I always have this conversation with them. Brand new baby agents, you know, they're cute, they love houses and people. They're really excited. And I love working with them because I remember being that. And, you know, Simon Sinek is always in the back of my mind when I work with them. There's only 2 ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. The fastest way to inspire someone is to understand why they do what they do, why they believe what they believe, understanding why they make decisions. Not just what they decide or what they do or how, but why. Why is one of the most important things, but how do we understand that it's about their why and not ours? When I work with brand new baby agents, I always say to them, tell me why I should hire you. And their response is always things like, I take initiative. I'm really excited. I have all the time in the world to devote to you. I'm super motivated. I work with the best brand. I work with the best company. I'm all in. I will give you all my attention. I hear all those answers and then I look straight into their eyes and I say, I asked you why I should hire you. And you gave me a whole bunch of I statements. Every one of those lines started with I. I asked you why. And so the 6th way that I want you to be weird is lead with why. And I want to show you how to do that. How do you lead with why? I always tell my brand new baby agents, swap that I statement for a why statement. All the things they said are true. They are motivated. They are excited. They do work with great brands. They are all in. But we've got to learn to starting the sentences with you. That's how you create a why statement and not an I statement. You are going to find that buying or selling isn't always predictable. You are going to find that things will come up that are tough or unexpected or unpleasant. You are going to ask a lot of questions. You're going to get frustrated at times. You aren't always going to know how this is going to go, but I am going to be here for you every step of the way. That is why you should hire me, because you've got to have a why statement. That is how, honestly, you lead with why. And that is a huge way to be different. And different is better than better, right? So I always challenge my brand new baby agents, stop starting all of your marketing and your emails and your postcards with the word I. and turn it around and create a why statement. And you are welcome to steal this and use it word for word. Because I want you to remember that it's not about your why. That's not how we inspire people to trust us. It's about their why, speaking to their why. The seventh and the final way that I want you to be weird in your business is to narrate the process. I have helped people in this real estate business for many, many, many years. And I have bought homes myself 9 times in 4 different countries. And the process is scary. It is complicated. Every single time it's different. It's never the same. And you know that. You do this every single day. But for someone who hasn't done this 9 times or doesn't do this every single day, buying or selling a house is scary and challenging and uncomfortable. It's like the game of Candyland. I always say, sometimes it's a little more like Chutes and Ladders, but it's like the old-fashioned game of Candyland. Like the new Candyland, it's really, you know, like gentle and sweet and pink, but the old Candyland, you remember, you would fall and like lose yourself in the gumdrop forest, or like the old lady in the like candy house would eat you. You know, it was legit dangerous. And like Candyland, you know, as a buyer or seller, I just want to get to the end. I just want to get to the end and either get a set of keys or get rid of a set of keys. But sometimes we get stuck and get mired down, and sometimes we have to go back a step. Sometimes we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Buying or selling a house is challenging. You know this. But one of the things that we in this industry don't do very well is narrate the process. We don't talk to people about what those steps are actually going to look and feel like. And so I always recommend that agents create a Candyland chart. Now, it could look like anything. It could look like this. It could be a bunch of sticky notes. It could be a bunch of squares. I'll give you an example of one in a minute. But basically what it does is it says, okay, you've decided to buy. Here are all of the steps that are going to take place after you've made that decision. Here are all the things that could happen. And these are the places where you might have to go back a step, or maybe go back to the beginning. Maybe you're going to have to start all the way over. And this is true of whether you decide to buy or you've decided to sell. You know, the Candyland chart is essentially, you know, a series of steps and places where you might get mired in and have to go back. And the better you can explain this process, 2 things are going to happen. 1, your buyers and sellers are going to be better prepared when those things actually do happen. When that point comes where you go, we didn't get the house. You know, we got a sign back, or the inspection came back. It's bad news, or it didn't appraise. When we get mired in those gumdrop forests, they're better prepared. They go, I know, you told me that this could happen. But the second thing that is going to happen when you have a Candyland chart is when you go through all of this at the end, and you've talked about what you're going to do to pull them out of the gumdrop forest in each one of these steps, they are far less likely to say, so what do you get paid for? They get it. They understand. They don't just see the sign go in the yard and the closing day. They see everything else. I want to show you an amazing example of a company in Denver who just did one of these, put it on Instagram. Now there's a million examples of these. If you go on to Pinterest or even Google Images and you search buyer seller flowchart, there's a million of these. But I love this one because it's really simple. Right? It was a Instagram swipe. The selling process. This is what happens all the way to the end. And, you know, they've sort of called out what happens. Yay, what could happen? These are all the things that you need to be aware of. The better your Candyland chart, the weirder you are, the more different you are, and that's better. Let's recap the 7 ways I gave you to be weird today. 1, make it easier for them. Number 2, own the problem. Remember, this is not a problem you're having. This is a problem I'm having. And I'm going to own that problem and find a way to solve it. And that's what I'm going to market around. Be willing to be unpopular. Don't wait for Christmas Eve to be a little bit weird. The future belongs to the weirdos and the misfits. Create stuff that you would use. Do a deep dive into do an audit into your marketing and ask yourself, is this something I would want to receive? Does this answer my questions? Don't be afraid to pivot. Most important thing around pivoting, pivot when times are good. Don't wait until things are bad and you have to pivot. Everyone's pivoting at that point. When things are good, that's when you can take risks. That's when you can spend money. That's when you can try out things. That's when you can afford to be weird. Lead with why. Remember, it's about their why, not ours. So have a why statement, not an I statement. And lastly, narrate the process. If you even do one or two of these things, you are going to be wonderfully weird. And weird, different is better than better. I'm going to leave you with one quote today, and then I'm going to take some questions. So feel free to jump into chat, ask questions if you have any. Weirdness is why we adore our friends. Weirdness is what bonds us to our colleagues. Weirdness is what sets us apart and gets us hired. Be your unapologetically weird self. In fact, being weird may even find you the ultimate happiness. Absolutely love this. I'm hoping that you're all leaving today with a little bit of motivation to be weird. Now, before I let you go, I'm going to go in here and look at questions. Yes, everyone has some comments. The ENSA report. Yes, absolutely. In communicating, the make it easy for them. How can you not fall into the I and make it more about the why? Really good question, Justin. How do we make it more about them and not fall into the I? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have questions on this. Here's how we help. You aren't always going to understand this. Here's how we help. You probably have struggled with this in the past, or you probably have questions you didn't know you should be asking. Here's some of the answers. I think making it easy for them is mostly around education. How can I answer the questions you didn't even know you should ask? I really think that that's an important way for us to be weird and make it about them. It is still about us. We're still solving the problem and helping, but it's really focused on you need this and you don't even know it yet. And that's my job. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, so we are at time. We're right on the hour. I don't see any other questions in here. Looks like we actually have Donald on here. Donald, did you want to say anything? Did you get your sound working?
Well, I hope so. I've
There
just
you
unmuted.
are.
Yes, first I want to thank you so much for the presentation. It was working once you got going, and I have to send a special thanks to Bianca for opening. I had the great intro for you, but oh well, I'm sure Bianca was just really terrific. I really do appreciate everyone. I appreciate you. I appreciate the tips. I really appreciate all who joined us this morning, because we all need inspiration. We all need motivation. And this being the first event of the PMAR Master Circle, I'm really pleased. We, as part of the leadership team, are working very diligently to bring you some great events that inspire you and inform you and engage you. Our next event will be in June, and get ready for this. It's going to be live and in person. So finally, we look forward to that and the opportunity to network. And Valerie, I'm really glad you were here today. It made me smile. So.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.